Hey John, so I just wanted to go over this game and review it to take a look at what things you might do differently. So starting off, this is not a normal response to D4, so I would take a look at just some basic openings. Like you could probably Google good openings for beginners, and then um, maybe Google good responses for common openings like Ebore and D4. And you just want to stick with a solid established opening for the most part instead of just kind of like improvising stuff at the start of the game. This does kind of transpose into the Slav, but because the ordering is different, uh, I had the opportunity to go to E4 and control the center. So if you played the ordering correctly for the Slav and you did D5 first, then I wouldn't be able to do this. So that's why ordering matters. But it looks like a Slav type structure, and I was going to start D4, so that would have been like a standard opening, but it isn't. Um, so we're at this position now. I think, honestly, I think I probably should have just pushed instead of capturing here, and I think I could have made the game a lot more difficult for you. But I didn't think of it. I didn't realize that at the time. So that's how you punish this. Like I push this pawn, and then you can't develop this knight, and then you have like, your position's really cramped, and you'd have problems from like at this starting at like 2 moves into the game as opposed to like later on. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Um, but I wasn't thinking about it this time, so I missed it. So I guess you kind of left out there. But yeah, so learn basic openings. Pick a solid one for white, and then you want two for black. One response to E4, one response to D4. So you really just need bare minimum 3 openings. That's all I know. And then that should set you up for success. Make sure you don't start the game at a disadvantage from the opening. That's the main goal. So from here, it's just natural developing moves, pin my knight. So here you willingly trade the bishop for the knight, which is definitely something you don't want to do unless you have a very good reason. Bishops are slightly more valuable than knights because in an endgame, a bishop can cover the entire board. Like he can move from one side of the board to the other, whereas the knight can only move in a limited range. So you can definitely abuse that in an endgame. If you trade that material and one person has a bishop and one person has a knight and there's a couple pawns on the board, the person with the bishop typically has an advantage. So you don't want to just give away that advantage in the endgame because a lot of close games will end up trading into an endgame. So that's why you don't willingly trade this. I'd say bishops are worth about 3.5 points of material, knights are worth 3, but it changes depending on what the position looks like. And then you could say the compensation is this doubled up pawn on the c file, but I'm not concerned about this whatsoever. For example, I can just take your pawn and then my pawn structure is fine. Or you take and then I develop. So I don't think this compensation is worth it. I don't like this trade personally. But that was not like your gravest mistake. A lot of people like to take this knight here, and it's whatever. I see it even in my games, so it's not like the worst thing in the world. This is, I think, your biggest mistake. You just traded away your dark square bishop, and then you created all of these dark square vulnerabilities on your king side, and then you castle king side. So it's like if you're castling king side and you are adopting a fee and kettle structure on the king side, on the side that you're canceling, if you lose your dark square bishop, these squares are permanently weak for the rest of the game, and you are at risk of being checkmated. So this type of move makes no sense. And as soon as I saw that, I immediately sought to start punishing it because you have no choice, really. I can pawn break in the center, so leaving your king in the center is not safe because as soon as you just capture, your king is not safe in the center. You can't really. It's not safe on the queen side because you traded this pawn, and now it's not safe on the king side. So the game, you're going to be playing. You can have a very. I'm not going to say the game's over right now, but you're going to have a very hard time playing out the rest of the game after this move. Like this is like the worst mistake that you made in this game. You can only fiend Keto. Really, I would only fiend Keto if you have your dark square bishop and you plan to put it on this square, and then that's reasonable. But with your dark square bishop on, this pawn structure just makes no sense. You don't want to raise the pawns in front of your king for no reason. So if you're going to do something like this, it would be only because you plan to keep your king in the center or you plan to castle queen side. But none of those, like I mentioned before, neither of those are good options. So this move is I mean, I think this is where the game broke, to be honest. So here, I immediately recognize it, so I start my attack immediately. You move your knight in position, and see how your dark squares are weak? So you handed me a pin. Your knight isn't defended by the pawn anymore. So you're already in a cramped position. This is very difficult for you. Getting out of this pin is difficult because if you move your queen, you lose your knight. So it's like you created the disadvantage here. So then I keep the attack moving forward. I don't even care about castling my king because I know that you're going to have such a hard time dealing with this because of the weaknesses that are in your position. Now you castle, so it's like, you know, it's um, signing your own death for it, so to speak. But it's like, what other option did you have, really? So then I move my queen into the attack. So your knight is pinned, he can't move anywhere, and now I pressure it with the queen. It's a classic tactic to threaten the piece that can't move, force it to move. And then you defend it with the king, which is reasonable. And then now I start to attack, so I advance this pawn. And I'm playing pretty recklessly, to be honest. I normally don't play this recklessly, but it's an unranked game. I don't have Elo on the line, so I figure, whatever. Like, let me just take all the risks that I wouldn't take in a regular game, and see what happens. Normally, if this was like a rated game and I was playing someone on my level, I'd probably try to get my king to safety before doing an attack. But in this game, I just figured, like, yeah, I'm just gonna go for it. I don't necessarily recommend this. I think like moving the bishop out of the way, castling, and then trying to do something is probably safer. But I just felt like having fun in this game. So you try to push my bishop away, which is fine. So I move my bishop, move the knight here. Now the pin is broken, which is also reasonable. And let's see, you're threatening this pawn, but it's already covered by my queen, so I don't really care. Oh, I thought about this a lot. So I was calculating a bunch of different options of where you can move the knight and how to respond, and I decided to end up here. I'm not going to go over that now because I just don't feel like it. I don't think it's all that relevant. So now you have two attackers on this pawn. So now this pawn is in danger. So how do I respond? Yeah. So your pawn here is hanging. So that's one thing that is very common. So every time your opponent moves a piece, you need to see what that changes about the position and evaluate it to check to see if it threatens anything. So here, when I move my queen over, you move your knight here. I move my queen over. I'm threatening this pawn now. So you need to recognize that immediately. I have a battery on this pawn, two pieces attacking this one piece, still only defended by one piece. So if you don't do something, it's hanging. So I assumed you'd move it up, but instead of doing that, you missed it because you're not used to this pattern. So you try to set up an attack of your own, and it's a very common thing for people to not pay attention to what your opponent is trying to do and focus only on what you're doing. But that will hold you back in chess. And if you're not considering your opponent's threats, you will fall for them every single time. And if their threat is just faster than yours, then you end up coin flipping games because they're going to be decided by who makes the threat faster. If you're never playing defensively or looking defensively, so you got to look defensively and evaluate your opponent's moves for threats before you move forward with your plans. So I just take the pawn to check, and then of course that also skewers your rook here. So this wasn't a tactic. This was just me threatening a piece, and that was missed. This is a tactic. So this is a skewer. So I'm checking your king, but I'm attacking the rook through the king. You have to move the king. So then I'm up material. I get the rook for free. And this is pretty much game. So the game is more or less over at this point. I just need to trade down material, and I'm winning at the end game. I can still have checkmating chances. I have lots of checkmating chances, so I can try to end game that way as well. The only thing is you have some counterplay because my king isn't castled. So I told you this is risky, not castling. So I mean, you could do something here. I don't like this, so I try to simplify. I know the position is winning, so I'm just going to trade the material off, so you don't have any interesting counterplay. So I'm fine with this queen trade. It makes checkmating you harder, but it also makes it where you have no chance of checkmating me. And I'm up with material, so no issues there for me. I advance this pawn, and yeah, so you want to respond to this in some way. You don't want me to just take this pawn with check for free, because that's just a free pawn. So your king is not safe still. Even though you got the queens off the board, your king is not safe. There's an x-ray between my rook and your king, which is another tactic. So my rook is eyeing your king down, so when I take with check. You can't even take the pawn because it's defended by the knight. So I take with check, you move your king, and then I don't even care about the bishop, honestly, because now I can threaten a pawn promotion and get a king. So I'm just taking with check again. Go ahead and take my bishop, check again, and then you move out of the way, and then I get a queen, and it's checkmate. So Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward game. I would say the main mistakes, to recap, the most critical one. So yeah, the most critical one was, I already talked about the earlier ones, but this right here, this is like game. I don't. Yeah, this is like game breaking. This is, it just gives you too many opportunities to attack. So you need to really think about your pawn movements. You need to have a plan from the opening, so you need to understand just basic openings, and then the rest of the mistakes in this game. So this is just game breaking. It sets up so many opportunities for me to attack strategically, and the rest of the mistakes were kind of just like not checking for pieces that were hanging, so not checking for opponent's threats, and then some tactical mistakes here and there. So you didn't recognize the skewer pattern, and yeah, not counting threats. But I mean, the position's already lost at this point, so it's kind of whatever. And yeah, and then this is just more of like a gift, and then it's just checkmate. So I mean, that's pretty straightforward. But yeah, the main thing I want to focus on is the pawn structure. You compromising the pawn structure in front of your king broke this game. So that's something that you want to keep in mind for future games. Be very careful about pawn moves in front of the king, especially if you plan on castling. And then you want to learn some real openings and just play those. So yeah, Google good openings for beginners to get some ideas, find one you like, and try it out. Good luck.